Our guest today is Matthew Ganter. Matthew is the founder and CEO of Altum Strategy Group, a next generation consultancy transforming how companies approach digital strategy. He is an expert in AI, cybersecurity, and business transformation, and he's with us today to talk about what it really takes to lead successful digital transformation in an era defined by AI, cybersecurity challenges, and the growing demand for what he calls purpose-driven innovation. So, Matthew, welcome to the program today. Look, what do you mean by purpose-driven innovation?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for having me as well. So, purpose-driven innovation is really a strategic approach that helps organizations align new ideas, products, services, or processes in a way that clearly articulates their purpose as a business, but ultimately drives the greatest value to their customers. And by aligning to purpose-driven innovation, you're really taking into consideration, how the business makes money, certainly revenue, but it also takes into consideration how does that impact society and environmental issues, sustainability issues on a broader stage.
Mhm.
So every company, that I've engaged with or talked to or that I'm familiar with has some sort of purpose-driven innovation and maybe call it different things, but that's becoming the kind of foundational forward path for a lot of entities, especially as they look at adoption of advanced technologies like AI, which I'm sure we'll talk about more in today's podcast.
Now, you've said that if companies do not manage their data well, that they're in trouble. Can you unpack what you mean by that, and why is data readiness such a make or break issue today?
Yeah, so the old adage of garbage in, garbage out very much applies to AI. And the reason for that is AI only thrives if it has high quality, well-governed data that it's able to consume and use to generate value and ultimately generate the outcomes for the business. So, in order to make sure that your data is ready for that use case, you need to take a very thorough approach to data readiness and make sure that folks are understanding that it's a strategic imperative. It's no longer a technical imperative to get your data right. Because without your data being correct, organized, harmonized, in a way that you as an end user can use it, that an AI can use it, and that ultimately your company can use it, you're not going to get to the anticipated value and outcome of that AI use case. And really the other piece to it is if you look at data, data has always been one of the core assets of any business, regardless of what industry the business operates in. In order to really put yourself into a better competitive position, there's never been more of a mandate than there is right now to leverage data as that vital component to your business to drive growth, drive decisions, drive insights, and really drive growth for the long term.
I like what you said there. Data must be correct, organized, and harmonized. Did I get that right?
You did. You
That's an
did.
interesting way of putting it, especially today. Now, of course, a lot of companies are rushing to implement AI. It's all we seem to talk about, but it can be a challenge, and many digital transformation efforts fail. From your perspective, what separates organizations that succeed from those that do not?
Yeah, for successful adoption of AI, we firmly believe in a five-step process. So step one is really defining what that business problem is first, upfront. Second is assessing the data readiness and the gaps within your data, kind of going to what we were just talking about in terms of making sure that your data is organized and governed correctly. The third step is designing your program for the use of responsible AI that incorporates ethics, privacy, security. The fourth is building that cross-functional executive team and execution team to really support the enablement of AI and for those stated use cases. And then the fifth is monitor, measure, and iterate, right? The traditional continuous improvement process as you continue to roll out AI and stabilize it for that specific use case, and then move on to subsequent use cases across the business.
Now, those are super powerful and super important elements and a great framework. You mentioned privacy in there, and of course, I need to ask you about that. You've voiced concerns about AI data privacy and bias and transparency and misuse. We see things more and more every day, deep fakes and so forth. They're in the news every day. What should responsible organizations be doing now to address these issues of privacy and bias and transparency?
Yeah, so it really starts off with establishing a really strong governance framework. So the governance framework needs to include the ethical guidelines for the use case of AI. It also needs to include what is acceptable use and unacceptable use of AI within the business. That's really going to set the people and cultural tone for the use case of AI, right? That's very, very important for the adoption and successful adoption of AI. The second is really understanding the data and using a diverse data set to solve your problems, right? And that's going to help both with the data and make sure your data is consistent, but also varied enough to give different data points and points of view within the AI itself. You can also use that to test models, and then that ultimately will help you mitigate bias because now you're diversifying your data set in a way that you can test against that data set for different forms of bias, right? And then the third piece is really making sure that you're transparent about where AI is being used in the decision-making process, specifically as to how AI is being used to solve customer problems, challenges, or be embedded within a lot of customer-facing applications, right? And then to kind of wrap that all together, really across the entire journey, and as you deploy it, it's going to be important to make sure you're monitoring AI for any misuse, including the use of synthetic media or impersonation threats. That's kind of going to the deep fake component here.
Hmm.
It's also going to be important to collaborate with regulators, right? There's new AI regulations that have come out within Europe, but also certainly within the US around ISO 42001 being an example of that. So it's going to be important to understand those standards, work with the regulators, but also work with your industry peers to make sure that you're testing your AI in a way that aligns to not only the benefit of the business, but also the benefit of your respective industry.
Hmm.
And then the third piece or the last piece around deepfakes is really making sure you have a communication and crisis management process in place. Because listen, I would love to say it's not going to happen, but we all know it's not a question of if, it's a question of when it's going to happen. So it's really important to make sure you're ahead of that, planning for that worst case scenario, and prepared to respond, not react. It's key, right? To respond in a thoughtful way to address any kind of deepfakes or other issues that may come up through the use of AI.
I am speaking today with Matthew Ganter. He is the founder and CEO of Altum Strategy Group, a next generation consultancy transforming how companies approach digital strategy. He's an expert in things like AI and cybersecurity, and he's with us today to talk about what it really takes to lead successful digital transformation today. Now, Matthew, Altum Strategy Group is described as a next generation consultancy. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by next generation? And what was broken about the traditional consulting model, and how are you working to change that?
Yeah, Altum was really founded to allow our customers with direct access to experts that understand the need and help solution and see what the solution may look like from end to end. And really, we do that by focusing on the outcomes. So one of the things I'm really proud of at Altum is we don't sell our services in a traditional way where we're looking at billable hours. What we're really focused on is really what is the value, what is the outcome that we can drive for our clients, and really optimizing for our clients' impact and that value creation. So by doing that, we're able to blend strategy with systems thinking, which allows us to really bridge vision to implementation, otherwise strategy through execution. And that allows us to be very agile, very transparent, because we focus on quality and transparency in all things that we do. And we're really focused on co-creation with our clients. And that's really allowed us to position ourselves to not only enable our clients to build, but also help them build their muscle for ongoing transformation when we're not necessarily partnered with them side by side. So that's allowed Altum to really kind of step outside of the mold of traditional consulting, where we want to basically help companies learn to fish, guide them through that process for as short of time or as long a time as a period that they need us, but then really with the goal of stepping away and making sure that they're still going to be resilient and really set for growth over the long term.
Mm. build their muscle. Again, I like that. Now, you've helped some companies. Let's talk about this in the real world. You've helped companies modernize really massive systems, prepare for IPOs, overhaul their cybersecurity. Can you share a behind the scenes story of one transformation that maybe didn't go as well as it was planned, and what it took to recover?
Yeah. So, with every large scale transformation, there's always challenges that occur. So, we're working with a large global logistics firm that really underestimated the cultural resistance for the adoption of a new enterprise resource planning or ERP system. So it was stalled due to the lack of frontline buy-in and unclear incentives, right? So with every project, we want to make sure that our people are not only able to do their day job, but also kind of take on the project work, and those two incentive structures were not aligned. So what we did, we jumped in, we helped them pause the project for a very short period of time. We paused the project. We re-engaged with all of the stakeholders from the bottom up and the top down to really make sure that we have alignment and that the executive team understands why that rate of adoption was so low and so stagnant at the ground level. And as a result, we are able to restart the project, have everyone really bought into the vision and the outcomes of that specific ERP transformation. And then that allowed us to actually have adoption surge, which was very different that they were experiencing before Altum jumped in to help. And that ultimately allowed them to address the issues across people, process, and technology that allowed that implementation to be successful, that allowed that system, once it was fully implemented, to become the backbone for their IPO readiness, and then ultimately layer controls on that, on top of that, and then allow them to launch successfully.
Now, you folks have worked extensively in industries like aerospace and defense. These are industries with very different and very pressing timelines and constraints. What lessons from those industries do you feel translate well into commercial digital transformation efforts, and what can we learn from that?
I would say the main theme there is mission critical thinking, right? So to your point about all the tight timelines, there's a lot at stake within those respective industries. So failure is not an option. So you have to have a level of rigor because rigor by itself is non-negotiable within those industries. And as a result, that really allows you to take on very complex environments, system integrations, system orchestration, process orchestration, and really break down those silos so that those specific entities can operate more efficiently, more effectively, and ultimately get to mission success faster.
Hmm.
So by building on that within the commercial space, certainly you want to make sure your long-term planning is correct, right? Sometimes as a public company, people think about profit in terms of quarters. When you think of aerospace and defense, it's not quarters, it's years, it's decades in terms of the length of their respective contracts.
Hmm.
It's also making sure that you build in a security first mindset that really focuses on resilience and really making sure that resilience is not a bolt on later. It's something that's embedded from the start and that it can scale and help you weather whatever storms may come, for various reasons globally.
Hmm.
And then the last piece is really making sure you have that stakeholder alignment. It's really important in those respective industries to have top down and bottom up, as I was just alluding to in our other example, alignment, because that ecosystem is so vast, and the providers and suppliers that you have to source material from are so vast in terms of where they are, what they do, whether it's a small little chip to a very large component. It's making sure you have that understanding, you know who to go to, and you know where you need to escalate internally or externally.
We are here today speaking with Matthew Ganter from Altum Strategy Group. He is an expert in AI, cybersecurity, business transformation, and indeed, we're here talking about the growing demand for what he calls purpose-driven innovation. Now, Matthew, you're a vocal advocate for impact capitalism. How do you help clients turn that into a philosophy, a long-term growth strategy, and it's something concrete? Impact capitalism, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so impact capitalism is really helping companies look beyond shareholders. It's looking at the employees that work within the business. It's looking at the communities in which they operate. And ultimately, it's looking at their role globally within a respective industry, but also kind of environmentally in terms of how they operate and what their practices are. And that allows them to really to tie their sustainability and growth goals to core business metrics and not just make them about reports, right? And that is a long-term strategic thinking process that unlocks a lot of potential for businesses. And as a result of that, you can then use stakeholder mapping to identify mutual wins and also identify and address long-term risks, be it around supply chain, for example. You also can then move towards more of a balanced governance model that rewards sustainable and profitable growth, but also while taking care of your employees and the communities in which you operate. And then by doing all of those different steps, you're making purpose operational and really embedding it into the operational processes that you take on every day. And that helps drive a lot of value around hiring, product design, and ultimately incentives for your employees and for the company as a whole.
Researchers and consultancies like McKinsey, Bain, KPMG, others all point to research that tells us that the failure rate of digital transformation can be very high, 70, 80% or more even. That surprises me, even today. What are some of the most common blind spots that executives still have during digital transformation, and what can we do about it?
The number one blind spot is really thinking that a digital transformation project is an IT project by itself. It's not. It needs to be a business-driven project or program in very close partnership with the technology or IT organization. Because really, in order to unlock transformation, true transformation, it's not about implementing a system or a set of systems. It's really enabling your people to work more efficiently with well-defined processes in a system that allows them to operate more effectively and efficiently and drive the value and the outcomes for that respective company, be it, selling product, selling software, selling services, whatever it is. At the end of the day, that's the value that you're trying to achieve, which is that revenue growth, that profitability, and ultimately driving to a purposeful outcome for the business. And I would say that the other thing that a lot of executives kind of overlook is, the world is changing very fast, specifically with technology, right? AI, as we've talked about today, is changing every day, every hour, it feels like nowadays. And really, it's important for leadership and executives to understand that rate of change is only going to go faster, not slower. So if you're not making thoughtful decisions and timely decisions to drive the business forward through the use of a digital transformation program, you will fall behind.
Mm.
And that's one big thing that in the conversation that I'm having with folks around when do we start, how do we start a digital transformation? It's okay, where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Let's start there, and then let's really work backward.
Can you give us an example of one organization that you feel has been particularly successful with digital transformation? What did they do? What can we learn from that? And what were the results?
Yeah, so we have a fintech or financial technology client that was under a lot of regulatory scrutiny and also faced stalled growth. And it's because they grew quickly without necessarily having the right people, process, and technology in place to support that growth. So we came in, assessed their overall footprint, and really determined, okay, if you really want to reach these goals with, again, with understanding what their North Star is, we help them select and implement a modernized data architecture, as well as supporting financial and operational applications that we were able to then embed compliance by design and really build out a controls program that allowed them to address some of the regulatory issues that they were facing. So by putting those two together, we were able to help leadership really obtain an understanding digital fluency around what their tooling and what their technology can really allow them to unlock. We also help them embed and implement an agile governance structure that allow them to really grow into the compliance requirements needed of a public company. And then within 12 months, we're able to 3x their product launches, as well as reduce their audit findings by 40%. Now they're a market leader and also a top place to work for a lot of talent.
Matthew, we have reached the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if you could please provide us with three quick action items that our listeners can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice.
Yeah. So the first one is if your data is garbage, then your AI journey will not drive the outcomes. So the most important thing is to audit your data to make sure it is clean, harmonized, and connected to your business. That's kind of point number one. Point number two is identifying one process where AI could reduce friction. A lot of times you'll hear, hey, we can start in sales. That's a good place to start. You could start small, learn fast, and then kind of scale from there. The third one is with all SaaS applications and tools, it's important to make sure you're assessing your cybersecurity threats. So by bringing cybersecurity into the next board discussion, it really puts that strategic focus on cybersecurity to really make sure that you're reducing your risk from the use of AI or other tools across the respective enterprise.
Well, Matthew, it has been great speaking with you today. We're almost out of time, but before I let you go, one last question. What should executives and business owners be thinking about now and strategizing for today in order to be prepared for the world in 5 years' time?
Yeah, Kevin, it's a great question. So at Altum, we actually run an annual survey, which we call the Next Wave Survey. So that allows us to capture input and feedback from C-suite executives to look at the year to come. So based on that data and analysis, really, there's really five key things that I'll leave you with. So the first one is AI has become a native business model. It is not just about using AI to build around it. So really embedding AI into your business and making that a core component of it. Number two is trust has become a currency. So transparency, ethics, and resilience really will drive brand value for enterprises for the future. The third is we're continuing to see workforce transformation. So it's really important to continue to focus on upskilling humans so that way you have human plus AI because that will be a strategic and competitive advantage. The next one is resilience planning is a competitive difference, right? You want to make sure that you understand where you are today, but also understanding where you're headed will allow you to identify any roadblocks or pain points along the way. So do that proactively and annually to make sure that you're keeping that up to date. And then the last one I'll leave you with is certainly we're seeing a lot of friction and conflict geopolitically. So it's really making sure you understand how that potentially impacts your business, be it around supply chains, data flows, and also any regulations that you may need to comply with, both here within the US, but also as you operate globally.
That is Matthew Ganter. Find him at Altum Strategy Group. Matthew, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Digital Transformation Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.